morning, everybody. Thank you, Jürgen. I'm really excited to be here. It's quite crowded, quite cozy, and I'm happy to see so many different identities at the same time. And I would like to welcome you to not only meet other creative people, but also to meet yourself in a way. So maybe before we start, if you like, you can give yourself a small intention for the talk. Maybe you have something you would like to learn or to know, or a question that you would like to have answered. So take a moment to think about it, and then we start. All right. I'm not kidding when saying that the first question I can remember asking myself was, who am I? Followed by questions like, who do I fit into this world? Am I normal? And big questions like these have been keeping me awake since I was a little girl. And I remember my father sitting on the edge of my bed, trying to explain to me what life is about, where our world is, or our planet is, and how our world works. And I decided back then that I will never understand the world and that nobody can ever give me answers. What I didn't know back then is that I'm the only one that can answer those questions, and that it's maybe not yet the time to do so. I can imagine that a lot of you have already asked yourself who you are. And of course, all of us might have a different understanding. But why is that so? It sounds like such an easy question, but it's actually such a big one. So asking people to describe them in a few words could give the following result. I'm a coach, I'm German, I'm a food lover, I'm a sister, I'm a woman, I'm a dancer. So as you can see, there are a lot of things that make us who we are. And we might assume different roles in our day-to-day life, like being a mom or a teacher. And then there are other things like our gender, our skills, our interests, or the things we like, our culture. And on the other hand, or you can say that half of the things that make you who you are based on the social environment, and the other half is genetic or has genetic causes. And on top of that, there are things that are given that we can't change, like where we were born. And there are things that we can create ourselves. And all this is part of our identity. And for most of us, it's not enough to know our names or where we were born. We want to learn something about our personality and how to build a fulfilling life. And the good thing is that our life is not set in stone. And our true self is something that we can't find. It's something that we create and develop over time, actively. I like to see the idea of identity as a creative process. However, there can be some reasons or distractions that keep us from working on that process. Our everyday hustle might keep us from, or doesn't leave a lot of time for the bigger questions. And I often ask myself, how much being is actually included in all the to-dos that we have? We ask ourselves so many questions and so many things, but we hardly take time to think about what we are thinking and really listen to our thoughts. And over time, what might happen is that we lose the relationship to ourselves. I, for example, was really busy with mastering all the classical steps while growing up. And this made the big questions I had in the beginning fade into the background for a long time. Instead of looking for answers, I worked very hard, maybe too hard, on becoming a supposedly successful marketing person, driven by the expectations of others and the ambition to get recognition and security. And when I first shared my doubts about what I have been doing with my mom, she put it in a nutshell and said, "Anna, you've always wanted to live too fast." And she was right. Better, more, different, for much too long. So how can we make our lives worthwhile, or how can we find ourselves or our purpose if the world wants so many things from us? What we need is breaks. And we need them most when we think we can afford them the least. Because without breaks, we just keep going. And a break can be something that is planned, of course, but it can also be something unforeseeable. Something that can be caused by unfortunate events, or luckily, as in my case, positive events. After 8 years in Hamburg's creative industry, I decided to plan my next career challenge, as I thought. And I moved to Amsterdam and started a job in a small tech company, a marketing job. And unexpectedly, this job gave me the time to take a breath. And with unexpectedly, I mean time. I thought I would just go on like all my other jobs before, and having not a lot of other things except work. And I started to think it all over, and I realized that there's such a huge difference between, on the one hand, achieving career goals, and on the other hand, thinking about the questions that I had been ignoring for so long. So I took the next journey, and the journey was to myself this time, away from a conditioned and stressed object to a self-determined person with a true why of life. So I started to learn more about my health instead of going from doctor to doctor and asking them to solve my issues. I adopted childhood hobbies again, and I adjusted my nutrition. And at some point, I realized, after dealing with one area after the other, that everything is connected, and that sometimes the problem lies in another area than we expect at first. And I learned more and more about myself, and after a while, I reached the next area, which was my job. And I started to ask myself, how did I end up here? And what have I been doing for the last 10 years? And especially, what for? I wondered if there wasn't a way to do something more meaningful, something that matters not only to me, but to the world as well. And with this new challenge, a new conflict, or a new challenge crossed my way, and I realized that I had a big conflict with my own identity. Two souls are housed within my breast, and each will wrestle for the mastery there. I would even go further than this quote from Goethe and say that we have a lot of different personality parts, and all those sub-identities can cause disunity within ourselves. If we feel the need for change, what happens is that we reject it very quickly. This can be caused by a negative belief that we have about ourselves, and another common reason are the unlimited possibilities that we have. And what happens is that we start to create a wonderful vision of how everything could be, and back to reality, we lack orientation, and we don't know which one of all the possible ones is the right one to go. So the next thoughts that we have are all about the possibly unsuccessful events that can happen, or attempts. And we resign to the pull that pulls us even tighter into our old shoes, which are worn out, and the crooked heels might cause a bit of imbalance. But we tell ourselves that it's still that it goes reasonably well, and apart from the little wobbling we have. And this is because of the lazy safety thinker within us, who convinces us with a list of all our failures that we've had, and tries to justify our rejecting behavior. It's actually not that bad, he tells us, and lets us hold on to the old. And what we do is that we give up our original recurring desire to act. But what we ignore and forget is that there's something else that needs attention. This is the inner conflict, and here you can see all the inner voices that popped up regarding my future job situation. For example, there was, of course, maybe the strongest one, also the anxious one, telling me, you can't do it. together with the safety fanatic telling me you will definitely fail. But on the other hand, there were also like other parts of me, like the curious one, telling me you can do it, it will be fun. And also the dreamer telling me even, I want a better world. What happens is sometimes when it gets silent, or when we get silent, it gets loud. And if we take the time to listen, we might bump into an inner dialogue that might feel a bit overwhelming in the beginning. And what happens is if we push away or ignore these parts of ourselves, they eventually become louder and louder, and sooner or later they will find their way out. The good thing is that we are still one person. And our job is to balance those different conflict partners and to see which one might need a bit more attention. In my case, I called him the director. And what happens is that our personality matures if we are able to solve the inner conflict that we have and understand and use all the parts that we have as one integral part of our existence. I understood that all those parts have a right to be there because eventually all of them wanted to achieve something positive for me. And I realized that all the opponents just were there to protect me. And so I was able to calm them down. And I realized, or the director said that it won't be easy, but doable. So what I did, as a result, I quit my job. Now you could say that I lost 10 years of my life by just working and denying myself that I was a bad friend, a bad daughter, completely ego-driven, and it took me way too long to realize that. Because personality, excuse me, this is exactly how I first saw it in the beginning. And what we tend to do is we tend to focus on our bad experience, or on the bad experiences we have, or define ourselves by them. And we tend to focus on what's missing. But what personality development does, it helps us to make sense of all the experiences that we had. Your story depends on the way you see it. And the way you see it impacts your life and the life of others. You can decide what to make out of it and how to tell your story. When I changed my perspective, I realized that all my experiences make me who I am. And without those experiences, I would never be where I am now. And instead of wasting more energy on regretting and focusing on the past, I figured out that all my experiences were quite helpful for my future. So sometimes we need to see what we don't want in order to see what we want. And sometimes we might even need to run into a brick wall in order to develop our potential. So my story is that I quit my job, and it's the greatest success of my career. Being fascinated by the complexity of people, their stories, and how they master their lives made me decide that I wanted to turn my personal passion into my new profession, which is personality development, because I wanted to learn more about people, their thoughts, their feelings, and the reasons why we do the things the way we do them. And after dealing with one area after another, I realized that everything is connected and that sometimes the problem lies in another area than we expect. You might remember this sentence from a few minutes ago, I'm not sure. But what I learned is that our life will give us the same task over and over again until we solve it. So I changed my way of living, I started childhood hobbies again, and I solved the conflict of having a job that doesn't have a meaning for me. But after all, some challenges in my relationship made me realize that I myself wasn't the person that I wanted to be together with. There was still another silent voice within me telling me that my current way of living wasn't right. I was still focusing too much on my job, and my mind was always so loud that I didn't consider my heart or what was truly important to me. So I figured out the biggest conflict I had with myself. And of course, my life is not perfect now. I still have negative thoughts and emotions, And there are new challenges that arise, or sometimes I fall back into old patterns, because personality development is a process that never ends. And now you know the story how I met myself so far. And the journey is as individual as we all are. And every challenge needs a different approach. There is not this one-size-fits-all solution. And nobody can tell you who you are or what you should do. But there are questions and tools that can help you on your way. And you need to figure it out yourself in the way that works best for yourself. And what I will promise you, if you start to meet yourself, it will pay off. It will pay off for yourself, because personality development is the key to happiness. It not only gives us clarity and orientation, but it gives us the chance to live in accordance with our values. And if we do what frustrates us, we start to give up part of who we are. But if we work on understanding ourselves, we get the chance on becoming happy and start to do the things that make us happy and stop the ones that don't. Another interesting side effect for you is that happy people are more creative. Not creative people are more happy. Because a positive mood is the base for being creative, and it enables the openness that creativity needs, which also might be interesting for companies when it comes to the level of innovation they have in regards to new ideas or solutions or thoughts. But it will not only pay off for yourself, it will also pay off for your environment. When we learn more about ourselves, we take a deep look at ourselves and at our lives. And after, or sooner or later, we will not only become aware on the effect that other things have on us, but also on the impact that our behavior has on everything that we are interacting with. And this leads us to responsibility and a feeling of compassion, what's truly important for us. And if we know that, we will automatically protect and improve our livelihoods. And in the end, this will lead to a more sustainable world, because we start to question our behavior and our thoughts and try to ask ourselves, or start to ask ourselves if it still makes sense to do the things the way we do them. And in regards to the major challenges of our time, we might feel paralyzed or stressed, but personality development helps us to find an attitude towards those fundamental questions. My vision is a better world-life balance. And it's a vision of a life philosophy where people created awareness for themselves, the people around them, and the world. A lifestyle that is not imposed, but self-developed. I know what it's like to start this personal process of change, and I'm incredibly grateful for everything that happened since then. And I know that the first step is often the hardest. And my sincere aim is to inspire others to create their own vision of a fulfilling life. And with Goodism, I support companies and people to experience the same positive change for themselves. My grandma just told me a few months ago that I was always collecting garbage from the ground when I was a child. And I feel that with Goodism, I found my perfect concept for a life that's worthwhile. I believe that the relationship we have to ourselves is the most important one. And I would like to invite you to become the person that you would like to meet and spend your time with, because you are the person that you will spend the rest of your life with. And because questions are better than any advice, I would like to end my talk with a question that you will never forget once you've started to ask it yourself. Who am I? Thank you.